The Florence Nightingale was a gleaming testament to humanity's capacity for mercy. She wasn't armed. She wasn't armored. She wasn't meant for battle. She was painted white and blue, lined with bright red crosses, so universally recognized that even species without color vision had been taught what they meant. A floating sanctuary in the chaos of a still fractured galaxy. She was also full of children. Wounded refugees from a half-dozen worlds lay in her beds, tended by human nurses and volunteer medics who gave up homes and families for a tour in space. Aboard her decks, laughter was a common noise. Laughter and lullabies sung in 20 languages. The ship had been cleared by every major faction in the quadrant, including the Galactic Ascendancy, whose patrol ships had scanned her just 40 hours earlier and waved her on with a bored chirp of approval. Then she was gone. No warning, no hail, not even a scream over comms. Just a blast, captured in grainy footage by a nearby mining satellite. One moment, she drifted through the Sargon corridor. The next, she was a silent, burning cloud. 3,812 souls vanished. Only the satellite survived, and its last image was of a glowing lance of light descending from a Bulker patrol cruiser, a design only used by the Galactic Ascendancy's military elite. The angle, the energy signature, the placement, it all confirmed the worst. For precisely 9 hours, Earth said nothing. In a chamber of polished obsidian and suspended gardens, the Galactic Ascendancy held its emergency tribunal. Lights glittered in the wide dome above them like constellations, one for each system under their rule. Beneath that sky, their High Council sat in long robes and thin smiles, confident this too would pass. Ambassador Sylvia Tran entered without fanfare. No escort, no weapons, just a dark suit, a simple silver pin of Earth's flag on her lapel, and a leather briefcase clutched in one gloved hand. Her footsteps clicked lightly as she approached the center dais. The Bulker delegate, High Marshal Krelvok, stood taller than her by several heads. His armor glinted like fresh obsidian, layered scales clicking softly as he turned. Ambassador Tran, Krelvok began, his tone rich with condescension. We offer you our deepest condolences. A most regrettable malfunction. I'm afraid I'll need to interrupt, Sylvia said, tone as smooth as a lullaby. Before you waste further breath dressing up murder as malfunction. The silence that followed was cold enough to crack glass. Another alien rose from the left, tall and willowy, insectoid in shape. A Korn-3 senator. Surely we can agree this was a systems error. Our investigation shows the targeting computer on the cruiser in question had not been updated. An anomaly. Sylvia gave a small, polite smile. Fascinating. You launched a gravlance at a ship that filed 17 peace route documents, bore 12 universal medical seals, and broadcast live footage of a 9-year-old Torvak child singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. An anomaly, indeed. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Krelvok flexed his claws. You dare speak to the council with such venom? She raised her eyebrows. Venom? Oh, no, High Marshal. If I wanted to deliver venom, I'd send Major Saito with a basket of fruit and a poem. No one laughed. A few shifted uncomfortably in their robes. She continued, folding her hands atop the briefcase. Earth requests, no demands, acknowledgement of a deliberate act of aggression. Not a malfunction. Not a clerical mistake. An attack. On a neutral medical vessel. With no provocation. Krelvok sneered. There was a rogue element in our ranks. The crew has already been punished. The matter is closed. Sylvia stepped forward. Not for us. The council murmured louder now, some leaning in to whisper in alien tongues. Krelvok's golden eyes narrowed. Earth would be wise, he said slowly, to consider the cost of escalation. Sylvia's smile widened just enough to be unsettling. And the Ascendancy would be wise to remember that Earth's history books are filled with stories about what we do when we're told to sit down and behave. She paused, then reached into her briefcase. Everyone tensed. What emerged, however, was not a weapon. It was a small black cube. She placed it gently on the stand before her. This is the final voice log of Nurse Lieutenant Riley O'Shea, age 29. Boston General Medical Corps. She was tending to a Terran hatchling with plasma burns when your lance tore through the ship. She pressed the cube. A voice crackled to life. Young. Calm. Too calm. If this gets through, and you're hearing me, then I guess I didn't make it. That's okay. I've had a good run. The kid's stable now. Got her through the worst of it. She keeps asking for juice. I think she thinks I'm her mom. Maybe I am. For the next few minutes. Not a bad way to go, huh? A pause. If this was a mistake, I hope someone owns it. If it wasn't, well, Earth's funny. We look soft. Smiles and puppies and birthday cakes. But we remember things. We bury our dead with names. And we build monuments out of steel. Please tell my sister I wore the necklace. The cube went silent. Sylvia left it there. Krell Vok broke the silence, voice stiffer now. We offer restitution. In credits, land, and tech sharing. Earth will be compensated for its loss. She tilted her head. Do you offer restitution to the dead? You want blood. Sylvia blinked slowly. I want understanding. A pause. Then explain your terms, Krell Vok growled. She turned slightly, looking up at the simulated stars. Do you know what a reckoning is, Marshall? In Earth culture, it means the time when accounts are settled. Not in coin. In consequence. Sylvia Tran looked back down, her voice quiet now. Measured. Earth will not declare war. We are not so primitive. But the ascendancy must know, the moment you targeted our children, because that's what they were, you invited something ancient. Something very old inside us. The part that waits. That watches. And when it strikes, it doesn't shout. Another brief pause. It whispers. Krell Vok opened his mouth to speak, but she was already turning, walking off the dais. By the time she exited the chamber, 3 alien intelligence agencies had flagged her speech as a Level 7 threat. The Korn 3 delegate called for closed talks. Krell Vok stormed out in silence. Back on her ship, Sylvia Tran took off her gloves. She sat down beside a small table where a coffee mug steamed next to a closed folder marked Blackroot. Eyes only. Captain Monroe sat across from her, boots up, chewing on something that looked suspiciously like an ancient Earth donut. You sure you don't want to just nuke their capital and call it a day? He asked, not looking up. Tempting, she said. But not yet. He lifted an eyebrow. Message sent. She looked at him, calm, composed. The message was the silence after the log ended. He sipped his coffee. And now, Sylvia opened the folder. Inside was a list of installations, times, weaknesses. Now, she said, we remind the galaxy that Earth's kindness is not weakness. It's restraint. Outside, the stars glittered innocently. 2 days later, a remote communications relay on the edge of Ascendancy space went offline. No explosion. No alert. Just silence. A week after that, a diplomat from the Creel Empire was overheard whispering that Earth wasn't just dangerous. They were deliberate. Back on Earth, families lit candles. In orbit above the far side of the moon, 6 matte black ships shifted their positions. No flags. No broadcasts. Just silent, empty hulls waiting for orders. They had waited before. They would wait again. The galaxy watched Earth with new eyes. Not as a curiosity. Not as a developing power. But as something far worse. Something polite. And quiet. And very, very angry. Captain Monroe didn't believe in war rooms. He believed in coffee, boots on tables, and a good map drawn in pencil on the back of whatever napkin or cafeteria tray was available. That morning, the surface of a reusable lunch placemat hosted a crude star chart, dotted with donut crumbs and red ink circles. Right here, he said, tapping the edge of the tray. This relay outpost, Lurven 3, lightly guarded, supplies fuel and comms to the outer Ascendancy patrols. Take that down. The rest of their listening net collapses like a bad souffle. Major Saito leaned in, sipping tea, without lifting his eyes. Wouldn't that alert them? Sure. But not fast enough. Monroe grinned and tossed a sugar cube into his mug. Besides, let them worry. It's their turn. Across the room, Sylvia Tran stood at the viewport, watching the stars inch by. She listened without interrupting, her hands clasped behind her back. She wore the same simple dark suit, but her eyes were different now. Not colder, just stiller. "We send the ghost team," she said finally. "No fire, no noise. Disable, disappear. Leave questions, not evidence." "They'll know it's us," Saito murmured. "Yes," she agreed, "but let them try to prove it." The room was inside the Envoy, a sleek diplomatic ship, repurposed without official records. Its hold was no longer filled with peace brochures and ration kits. Now it carried intel briefings, stealth suits, and a squadron of the most dangerous people Earth had ever quietly trained. Not killers for hire. Not soldiers in uniform. They were something else. Lieutenant Briggs walked in, wiping oil from her hands with a rag. Her jumpsuit was unzipped halfway. A blaster strapped her thigh, her expression half amused and half exhausted. "Is the plan to confuse them to death or just annoy them until they surrender?" she asked. Monroe didn't look up. "Both, ideally." "We hit the relays first," Sylvia said. "Then the fuel depots along the Barcan edge. Without them, their ships stall mid-jump. Once they're scrambling for logistics, we leak fake human fleet movement along the Abraxas corridor. That'll pull their forward units into open space." Saito raised an eyebrow. "And then," she said softly, "we erase an outpost." Briggs smirked. "Now we're talking." The plan was unorthodox, but so was the enemy. The Ascendancy had been built on intimidation, on flashy shows of force and overwhelming numbers. Their tactics depended on predictability. Honor duels, declarations, ceremony. Humanity, by contrast, was born of misdirection and momentum. They'd mastered the art of the sucker punch, the long game, and the pleasant smile right before pulling the trigger. On Lurven 3, a Bulker technician named Velcor tapped his claws against a console, yawning through a diagnostic screen. He was alone, stationed at the outer perimeter sensor dish, grumbling about the lack of decent entertainment streams. His last thought before the world blinked out was confusion. He thought he'd seen a flower bloom in the corner of his vision. He never made it to the alarm. 3 minutes later, the outpost's power grid went dark. Security systems looped fake footage. Supply manifests began reloading with false data. When the garrison commander finally noticed the anomaly, he blamed it on local solar flare interference. Meanwhile, in the vacuum between systems, human strike teams were already en route to the Barcan depots. Saito led one, his quiet demeanor belying the fact that he could plant an explosive in the time it took most people to blink. He rarely spoke on missions, but when he did, it was usually a line of poetry. No one knew if it helped or if he was just weird. "Silence is the drumbeat of ending," he whispered as he set the final charge beneath a fuel line thicker than a bus. Briggs, watching from cover, rolled her eyes. "Could you not?" "It's tradition," he replied, then pressed the detonator. The depot vanished into a bright plume, silent and sudden. Across the galaxy, 6 more suffered similar fates. No pattern, no claim, no declaration, just fire and silence. On a distant Ascendancy station, panic spread faster than protocol. Fleet Admiral Geron, a broad-shouldered amphiboid with translucent skin, barked at subordinates across multiple frequencies. "How are these attacks possible? There is no fleet movement. Earth hasn't even issued a formal statement of retribution." 1-8 hesitated before replying. "The humans, they don't seem to be following traditional warfare procedures." Geron gurgled furiously. "Of course not, they're barbarians. But they're precise barbarians. That's worse." Reports poured in: missing outposts, fake human signatures in untraceable systems, intercepted false broadcasts. It was chaos with surgical precision, a type of madness that knew exactly what it was doing. Sylvia kept her face neutral as the briefings came in. One by one, the red dots on the enemy's strategic map flickered out. No survivors. No witnesses. In the press, Earth said nothing. The official statement remained one of mourning and cooperative investigation. Behind closed doors, Sylvia read field reports while listening to old jazz. "Do you remember," Monroe asked one night, "when we were the underdogs?" She looked up from a dispatch. "We still are. We're just the underdogs with knives now. He chuckled. I think they're starting to realize it. The realization hit hardest when the Ascendancy sent a diplomatic courier to Earth. It arrived with all the proper symbols: white flags, goodwill banners, pre-recorded apologies. Earth's reply was a single encrypted file, titled Protocol Sumerian. No words, just a schematic of an Ascendancy flagship, annotated, with highlighted vulnerabilities. There was no official statement with it, but on the same day that file was received, that exact ship exploded mid-dock. Not in space, in dock, on live broadcast. Every Ascendancy leader watched it happen. No warning, no sign of an incoming fleet. Just a flagship turned into scrap metal in the heart of a fortified port. The shock was so great the markets crashed in 3 systems. And still, Earth said nothing. Back on the Envoy, Briggs leaned against the wall of the galley, biting into something she called a mission burrito, which seemed to be made from whatever the fridge hadn't frozen. You know, I kinda like psychological warfare. It's clean. Relatively, Saito murmured, tuning a listening device. Monroe swirled his coffee. We've taken down 12 of their logistical nodes, 4 fuel depots, and 2 command ships in 3 weeks, without a single formal engagement. Briggs raised her burrito in salute. Cheers to that. Sylvia entered, setting her pad down. They're calling for peace talks. Everyone paused. That fast? Monroe asked. They're terrified. Half the Ascendancy Senate believes we have a weapon that can strike through hyperspace. The other half thinks we've made pacts with the Void Gods. Saito nodded. Good. Briggs smirked. I'd go with Void Gods. Better brand appeal. Sylvia, Saturday. We've agreed to the talks. I'll attend. Location? Monroe asked. A station in the neutral zone. Astrid 9. Secure. Enough. We'll bring our own security. Briggs narrowed her eyes. Feels early. That's the point, Sylvia said. They want this over before it spreads. It already has, Monroe said. 3 minor empires are offering trade pacts. They think we're the new power in the sector. Sylvia smiled faintly. Then we continue the performance. Later that night, alone in her quarters, Sylvia reviewed the casualty list from the Florence Nightingale again. Not because she had to, because she chose to. She read each name, then closed the file. On Astrid 9, the stage was already being prepared. She would bring tea and a smile, and a very polite kind of vengeance. The docking clamps on Astrid 9 engaged with a heavy hiss, reverberating through the diplomatic vessel's hull like a breath held too long. Ambassador Sylvia transstepped onto the airlock platform with deliberate calm, flanked by 2 Earth delegation members in civilian attire. No soldiers, no visible weapons, just quiet confidence wrapped in courtesy. Her briefcase, as always, was tucked under one arm. The station's welcoming committee was already assembled, a quartet of Ascendancy delegates in ceremonial robes, led by High Marshal Krelvok himself. His expression was a masterpiece of barely restrained contempt, his gold-flecked eyes studying Sylvia like a zoologist, examining an unusually polite predator. Ambassador, he greeted, voice deep and leathery. I must admit, I'm surprised Earth accepted our offer of peace so swiftly. Sylvia gave him a warm, diplomatic smile. Why would we hesitate? Peace is always preferable to Messier alternatives. Her voice, as ever, was honey over razors. Krelvok stepped aside and gestured toward the central chamber. Shall we? They moved as one group through the pristine halls of Astrid 9, the polished obsidian floors reflecting the starlight that filtered in from the station's great window dome. The peace conference was staged like a theater, half for negotiation, half for optics. Floating camera drones glided silently above, capturing every angle for historical archives and, more immediately, public consumption. The council table was a massive circle of dark crystal, flanked by chairs shaped to accommodate various species. Sylvia's seat was plain, unadorned, and she took it without hesitation, folding her hands before her. Across from her sat Krelvok and 3 other delegates, all of whom tried very hard not to look like they were sweating. The first 20 minutes were filled with the usual ceremony, pledges, official regrets, mutual acknowledgments of unfortunate misunderstandings. The Ascendancy spokesperson, an oily-eyed KR1TH diplomat named Ulthari, even produced a signed declaration of restitution that promised peace, trade resumption, and compensation for the tragic loss of the humanitarian vessel. Sylvia read it without expression. Her fingers tapped once against her briefcase. She did not touch the tea they had offered. "I must say," Ulthari continued, attempting charm and failing, "we admire Earth's restraint. Truly, there were provocations, and yet you refrained from a full declaration of war. Most commendable." Sylvia tilted her head. "We do not consider grief to be a provocation, nor justice to be war." Krell Vox stiffened. "Justice? You've already destroyed 17 of our strategic installations. We have proof." "You have theories," she interrupted gently. "Nothing you can present to the Council without inviting questions about why those installations were placed near neutral territories, or why the commanders there never reported their coordinates to the Central Ascendancy Registry. Curious lapses in accountability." Ulthari cleared his throat. "This meeting is about forward movement, mutual gain." "Indeed," she said. "So let's speak honestly." A silence stretched. The cameras hovered closer. Sylvia reached into her briefcase and removed a single data crystal. She slid it across the table. "This contains a full tactical breakdown of the Ascendancy's Western Fleet network. Vulnerabilities, outdated encryption keys, even current fuel levels. Compiled by human intelligence." Ulthari's face twitched. "You admit to espionage. I admit to analysis. The data wasn't hidden, just ignored. Until now." Krell Vox growled, claws tapping on the tabletop. "What is your purpose in showing us this?" "To prove we don't want your collapse. If we did, this wouldn't be a meeting. It would be a warning shot, or a eulogy." She leaned forward slightly, voice softening. "You destroyed a hospital ship. We answered in silence. Precision. We could have brought fleets. We didn't. We only touched what was vulnerable. And we did it while smiling." Ulthari looked visibly shaken. One of the other delegates whispered into his communicator. Sylvia sat back, her expression unreadable. "You're afraid. That's good. Fear makes people think. It makes them listen. So now I'll give you the terms." She tapped the table. Behind her, one of the human delegates activated a small holographic projector. A simple image hovered in the air, an orbital schematic of Astra 9, highlighted in red, a dormant moon-sized object floating beyond the station's perimeter. Krell Vox stared. "That is a mining satellite." "Used to be," Sylvia replied. "Now it's called Mercy Protocol." Ulthari's translator blinked uncertainly. "What does it do?" Sylvia's lips curled slightly. "It watches." The delegates erupted into hushed arguments, eyes wide, voices frantic. Krell Vox's hands clenched into fists. "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. "Wouldn't I?" she said gently. "After you shattered our hospital? Burned children? Do you think Earth built its reputation on forgiveness?" She tapped a small device beside her wrist. Nothing seemed to happen. Then the hologram shifted. Live footage streamed from Mercy Protocol, showing it charging slowly, the light coalescing within its deep chamber like the glow of a sleeping sun. "We don't want a war. We want acknowledgement, consequences, and respect." Krell Vox stood so fast his chair toppled. "You'll never be respected. You're violent primates. You think fire makes you powerful." Sylvia's smile vanished. "No," she said softly, "but it makes us honest." At that moment, a quiet alarm sounded in the Ascendancy control deck. All orbital sensors flared. From Mercy Protocol, a narrow beam of energy lanced out, not toward Astra 9, but toward a desolate rock on the far edge of the system. A symbolic gesture. The asteroid disintegrated in an instant, vaporized so completely that even the debris was gone. The delegates stared at the empty space. Sylvia rose. "This is Earth's final offer," she said. "Accept the terms. Honor the memory of the innocents you murdered, or keep gambling, and discover what else we're willing to aim at." Krell Vox's rage was a quiet thing now. Cold, confused, Somewhere behind the fury, a new awareness flickered. This woman, this species, had hidden depths that terrified him. She walked away without waiting for a response. Back aboard the Envoy, Captain Monroe waited with 2 cups of coffee, one half drunk already. He handed the other to Sylvia as she stepped into the command chamber. "Well," he asked. "They'll sign," she said. "Fear or reason?" She took a sip. "Does it matter?" Monroe chuckled. "You really do have a flair for drama." "I used to be in theater," she said flatly. He blinked. "Really?" She didn't respond. Outside, Mercy Protocol went dark again. The damage had been done. The message had been sent. And somewhere in the Ascendancy's core systems, files were being deleted. Ships rerouted. Commanders retiring early. The Empire was shifting beneath its skin. Not broken, but shaken. The kind of shaking that preceded a collapse. Monroe glanced at the latest reports. "You know they'll retaliate somehow." Sylvia's voice was quiet. "Let them try." Then she opened a file. Not a mission plan. Not a fleet roster. A list of the dead from the Florence Nightingale. She scrolled slowly, whispered a name, and kept reading. The broadcast went out in perfect silence. No fanfare. No introduction. No warning. A black screen flickered once, and then opened on a live image. The Earth rotating slowly, quietly, unthreatening. A blue and green sphere cast in sunlight, serene in its orbit. Then a voice, familiar to every diplomat and news anchor in the galaxy, began to speak. "Ambassador Sylvia Tran. This message is not a threat," she said calmly. "This is a conclusion." There was no background music. No flag behind her. She sat in what looked like a garden. Real trees, real wind, sunlight filtering through maple leaves. The sound of birds chirping in the distance was not lost on anyone watching. For nearly a minute, she said nothing more. Then she looked directly into the camera. A month ago, the Galactic Ascendancy destroyed the Florence Nightingale, a civilian hospital ship. They claimed it was a mistake. Earth listened. We buried our dead. We accepted their condolences. She folded her hands atop a wooden table. Then we replied. Across 3 sectors, beings of every species stared at screens. Some watched in war rooms, others in cafes or cloisters or asteroid mining hubs. It didn't matter. They all watched. Because in the last 29 days, the unthinkable had happened. Earth, a planet barely 2 centuries into galactic politics, had brought an empire to its knees without ever declaring war. They watched as Sylvia continued. We didn't respond with fleets, or invasions, or speeches. We responded with precision, with silence, with understanding of your systems, your pride, and your vulnerabilities. You took lives. We took your certainty. Somewhere on the rim, a Creel warlord whispered, "She's not bluffing." The feed was transmitting in 12 million systems. We don't want your thrones. We don't want your planets. We want to be left alone. But if you mistake our humanity for weakness, if you look at our art and our laughter and our kindness and decide we're prey, you will learn a lesson we buried long ago in our own history. The screen behind Sylvia shifted. Footage played, fast and raw. Explosions in the void, Ascendancy ships blinking out mid-jump, silent human operatives ghosting through outposts, leaving only the hum of destroyed cores behind them. Names and dates flashed in the corners. No narration, just the aftermath. She kept speaking. We are a peaceful species. Until we are not. We were raised on fairy tales and monster stories, not realizing that we were the monsters people should have feared. We wore civility like armor and offered it freely. We still do. But never confused choice for inability. The footage ended. Just Sylvia again. Her eyes calm. Unblinking. This is not a threat, she repeated. It's a promise. Leave our people in peace, or the next message you receive will be the last. And then the screen went dark. The transmission lasted exactly 3 minutes. 3 minutes was all it took. In the following hours, the Galactic Ascendancy lost 4 major allies. Treaties were dissolved. Trade routes were abandoned. A dozen neutral species issued declarations of non-aggression toward Earth within the day. A senator from the Bulker homeworld resigned mid-session and vanished. Entire war fleets changed trajectory without orders, awaiting new directives that never came. On Earth, no celebrations were held. No fireworks. No speeches. Just silence. Captain Monroe sat in his office, a small room built into the command deck of the Envoy, flipping a coin between his fingers. On the desk before him lay a box of commendations that had never been issued, black medallions given to operatives who'd carried out surgical strikes with no name, no flag, no glory. "You think they got the message?" asked Briggs, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "They got it tattooed across their internal organs," Monroe replied. Saito entered behind her, silent as always. He set down a file. Inside were 12 more outpost reports, all empty now. "Operation Thorns complete," he said simply. Monroe nodded and looked at Sylvia, who stood at the window again, watching the stars. She hadn't moved in an hour. Not since the transmission. "Something on your mind?" he asked. She didn't turn. "I keep thinking about Riley." Briggs's expression sobered. Sylvia continued, her voice soft, reflective. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't looking for conflict. She was just there to help. She died trying to keep a child alive. And all they saw was a target. Monroe nodded slowly. "And now, Sylvia said, "they see the consequence." Briggs stepped into the room and tossed something on the table. A small, holographic statue of the Florence Nightingale, no larger than a coffee mug. The ship turned slowly in the air, flickering with soft light. "We did what had to be done," she said. "And we did it our way. Quiet. Clean. With style." Saito looked at Sylvia. "You going to retire now?" She glanced back, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Not yet. Too many empires still pretending to be civilized." He nodded, then walked out. Briggs followed with a shrug. "If you change your mind, I make a mean margarita." Monroe stayed behind, sipping lukewarm coffee. He studied Sylvia in the quiet. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't respond at first. Then, "No one should ever mistake kindness for weakness, Monroe. Not again." He raised his mug in quiet salute. Amen to that. Outside, the galaxy had changed. Not with a bang. Not with a war. But with understanding. The kind that lingers. The kind that keeps even warlords awake. And somewhere, deep within Ascendancy territory, High Marshal Krell Vok stood in a silent chamber, staring at a blank monitor. He had watched the transmission 3 times. Each time, it felt colder. He knew then what they all did. This wasn't Earth's rise to dominance. It was a revelation, a shift, a quiet rewriting of the galactic order. Not through conquest, but through clarity, through fire, and restraint. He whispered a phrase in his native tongue, a proverb older than spaceflight. "Never harm the angel that smiles, for it may only be smiling because it has not yet chosen to strike." He hadn't believed it until now. Now he did. And that was why the war would never come. Not because Earth feared it, but because everyone else did.